Kate Forbes' public opposition to gay marriage has likely blown up her SNP leadership bid. It's also generated an avalanche of discourse about the role of religion in politics. Kemi Badenoch is the latest to get involved.
We should be able to allow those people who do have religious views. I'm not a particularly religious person. I would say I'm not religious at all. But I understand it because I didn't grow up in this country. I grew up in a very religious country. So I understand what it means to people and how it can impact the way that they live their lives. And to stop people from saying what they really feel, I think is overly draconian. And I actually admire her for not being dishonest. It'd be very easy for her to tell lies just so that she could win that election. And she's not doing that. And I think that that's something that people need to take into account. I do think that those people who are withdrawing support from her, well, I would ask, why did you support her in the first place? Because I don't think that what she's saying is new. And I think it shows a level of unseriousness of many of the people who engage in political activity and commentary, where they don't take things seriously in terms of, why am I supporting this person? And they will support someone because of their gender or their race, rather than because the person's views actually chime with theirs. And we need to think about what people actually believe and the political principles that they're operating from, rather than anything superficial. And that's why the last 24 hours have panned out the way that they have.
Equally, there will be lots of people in this country who would like to hear the Minister for Equalities condemn the sorts of views that Kate Forbes has put forward today. Would you do that?
No. I will say that I personally support same-sex marriage. I think it's disappointing if people don't. I think always it's disappointing when people don't agree with me. But I would not want people to condemn me for having personal views. Disagree with the views, debate the views. But if you are asking me to condemn someone for their religious views, then you do not understand what the Minister of Equality's role is. I am the guardian of the Equality Act. Freedom of religion is one of the protected characteristics. To ask me to criticize someone for their religious beliefs when I'm supposed to be safeguarding it shows that those people don't understand equality. What they want is to use the Equality Act as a sword to fight their own personal battles, rather than as a shield to prevent others from discrimination.
It seemed a bit of a cheap shot, this people shouldn't support people just because of their gender or race. Now, I haven't seen much evidence that people supported originally Kate Forbes because of her, I presume she's talking about her gender. Her other candidates were another woman and then a Muslim man. So if you were doing this sort of cheap identity politics that Kemi Badenoch seems to be accusing SNP politicians of doing, it's not obvious that you'd go for Kate Forbes. The other point she made, I didn't think were entirely unreasonable though, Dahlia. She's sort of saying, at least she told the truth. She could have lied. And I thought it was also reasonable to say, what did the people supporting her expect? They knew that she was a fundamentalist Christian. I suppose they didn't know that she, would have used her religion as a basis to vote against gay marriage. What do you think of that in general? What did you think of Kemi Badenoch's intervention?
She was doing what she does best, which is being incredibly cynical. She's trying to frame this issue as a kind of freedom of thought, freedom of speech question. That's not what this is. This isn't about your personal religious beliefs. Kate Forbes is not just some random woman on the street. She's someone who is running for elected office. And this is about her being asked a question about, what are you going to do with the political power that you may hold if you win this election? Are you going to use it to roll back on hard-won civil rights? Asking that question, to me, is completely legitimate for someone who's running for election, and it is important to ask that question because someone can very much hold a personal religious belief but not govern or make a commitment that they're not going to govern in light of those personal religious beliefs, especially when we're talking about rolling back on the civil rights and rolling back on the freedoms of other people. Kate Forbes has just said that she's not going to govern in that way, that she would govern in light of those personal religious beliefs, which is out of step now with a lot of Scottish society. So the fact that, she's said that, and I agree, it's good that she's honest. She absolutely should be honest. It's very important that people know what's on the table. But the fact that people are reacting to that by criticizing it, publicly disagreeing with it, and saying they're not going to vote for her, that to me seems like democracy in action. I don't see how this is a violation of freedom of thought and freedom of speech. And even if it was a freedom of speech issue, which again, this is someone who's running for elected office, this is not just some random person on the street talking about their opinions. Even if it was that kind of issue, which it isn't, Kemi Badenoch is like the last person who has authority to claim to be a defender of freedom of speech and freedom of thought. This is someone who has used her tenure as equalities minister to essentially try to dictate what school teachers should and should not be teaching in their classrooms, to stop teachers from using what she calls racialized language like white privilege, to essentially get involved. She's made it her mission to get involved in like the research agendas of academics. You know, all I hear from her is going on and on about how the government opposes critical race theory. When was the last time you heard a government coming out and declaring a position against a academic theoretical framework that isn't even that common in the British universities? So she has actually been an outlier in her overreach of getting involved in the freedom of thought and freedom of expression of educators in this country. So she is the last person to be claiming to be talking about not condemning people for the personal views that they hold. That's all she's done as equalities minister. So really, this isn't someone who is invested in the ability of people to freely express their thoughts and opinions. This is someone who believes that people with and who is invested in people with reactionary views being able to spread those views and hold positions of political power, crucially, without backlash or challenge. What she wants is the absence of criticism, accountability, or being publicly challenged. That seems to me what she means when she says you're wrong to condemn Kate Forbes for having these opinions. What does she mean by condemn? Publicly disagreeing, publicly criticizing, saying you're not going to vote for her? Why is that? The freedom of expression and freedom of thought doesn't come with the absence of condemnation or the absence of disagreement. Reaction is part of the freedom to speak. So this is like a deliberate muddying of the waters by Kemi Badenoch. What she really wants here is for reactionary right-wing views to become popularized in the public sphere and to be shielded from criticism or from challenging. That's essentially what this is about, rather than any kind of sincerely held commitment to freedom of thought.
I think that clip taken in isolation, I think what she said, came across as being somewhat reasonable. I think it's when you look at it in the context of what else has occurred over the past few months that it seems so completely disingenuous. I mean, you've talked about, Tory policies when it comes to education and what teachers can and cannot teach. I mean, you can also look at a similar situation in a different party. Well, actually, I don't even think it is a particularly similar situation, but let's lay this out. So Kate Forbes, essentially, she wants to stand to be leader of the SNP and First Minister. She's been clear that she has some views, which she would let influence her policymaking, because she said she would have voted against gay marriage, that many people find objectionable. And as a result, what's going to happen? They're not going to vote for her, so she's probably going to lose. That's democracy in action. She's had the freedom to express whatever she wanted to express, and then people can or cannot vote for her, and they probably won't. There's nothing to worry about there whatsoever. Now let's look at a different political party. And you had the case of an MP stand up in Parliament and call Israel apartheid, which you have, all the leading human rights organizations agreed with, and saying that the Israeli government was fascist, and there are some fascists within the Israeli government, right? If someone wanted to stand up and say, well, look, I just completely disagree with that, and her party members and her electorate in that constituency can vote her out if they disagree, that would be fine. That would be democracy in action. What actually happened was you had a party leader say, no, that opinion you have expressed is outside of the realms of acceptability, and you have to apologize or lose the whip. That's a genuine sort of limit to freedom of speech, because you're saying we're not going to leave this up to the voters. We're not going to leave this up to the electorate. You have to change your views and say something else, or you will be disciplined. Now that to me is worrying. But you didn't hear Kemi Badenoch stand up and say then that this is a legitimate opinion, and we're stopping people voice their legitimate opinions. Now to me, that's a much more legitimate opinion. In fact, it's a true opinion that Israel is an apartheid state which has some fascists in government. That's demonstrably true. right? I don't think it is demonstrably true that gay marriage is wrong. I mean, obviously, I happen to be in favor of gay marriage, right? But you've got someone who says a demonstrably true thing in Parliament. Their party leader says, unless you deny the truth, you're going to be ejected from this party. Silence from the media, silence from Tory politicians, silence from anyone with any power whatsoever. Don't mind that at all. Nothing wrong. No imposition on free speech there. This is not an issue of freedom of belief. And then you have someone who says they're against gay marriage, and so some people don't vote for them. And now suddenly we have this big concern about whether or not people who have different beliefs are able to engage in politics. Seems disingenuous to me, to say the least, Dahlia. Any final thoughts on this story?
Yeah, I'm just sick of the obfuscation. If you took that kind of clip in isolation, if that was the only clip you'd ever seen of Kemi Badenoch talking, you'd be like, that seems, fair enough. It seems fairly unobjectionable. But when you're talking about it, not just in the context of what Kemi Badenoch herself has done and the positions that she's held and the way that she's used her position as Equalities Minister, as a front bench member of Parliament in order to stigmatise and stifle particular veins of academic thinking, which are really none of her business, but also in the context of we're talking about an election. We're talking about people putting forward their views, not just for the sake of it, but in the context of I'm vying to get a position of political power. It is completely legitimate for people to scrutinize what they think you're going to do with that power and act accordingly. It's such a kind of sinister way to essentially create this idea that right-wing people with reactionary views, people who want to curb the rights of gay people, of trans people, of black people, of brown people, of migrants, are somehow in some kind of persecuted minority where they're not allowed to express their opinions and they get cancelled for expressing, common sense opinions. It's a fake persecution complex. And I don't understand how we've gotten to the position where the entire, rhetorical framework of our government in the midst of a cost of living crisis seems to be around this central myth that right-wing people are being persecuted. It's just not true.